Here they come. Welcome everyone as you're arriving. Just a reminder that we are being live streamed this evening and we are recording this session. We'll begin in a few moments. Over to you.
Good evening, everyone. I know that we are expecting others, but you're all here on time, and Raj is here on time. So we're going to begin the first of our Black History Month lectures, which is called Structures, Barriers and Authenticity, UKME People's Vital Contribution Through the Church. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Raj Patel, who came to the UK in 1966 and in 1975 became a follower of Christ with a Hindu background. His areas of expertise are organizational development and diversity. He's worked in over 40 countries, both in secular and faith-based organizations. Many of these organizations have addressed discrimination in positive and creative ways, which has led to ongoing results. Raj has worshipped and served within the Anglican Church and has been part of committees and initiatives to address racism in the Church of England for many decades. In 1980, Paul Grant and Raj published the initial contribution to Black theology in UK, titled A Time to Speak. The title of this lecture indicates the authentic revolution that is now needed. So welcome to you, Raj, and thank you very much for joining us this evening. I'm handing over to you now.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Black History Month. I look forward to the other sessions. Polly has organized some fabulous sessions, and it's good to see some faces and some names that I recognize. So thank you for joining. And today it's titled as a lecture, but I'm not really very good at lectures. I'm going to get you involved if that's okay. I'll need your help because I'm going to do a little bit of an exercise as well. And so that we can ground some of what I want to communicate through the discussion, through the findings that we gained. So a fantastic title, Structures, Barriers and Authenticity. I bet you've not come across that title ever before. And Polly gave me a free hand, and so I thought I'd put those three together. And then we have this incredible acronym, UKME. Now, let's be honest, put your hand up if you already know what UKME stands for. Well done. Gosh, you are very Anglican. And it's the only place I've ever seen it. But this is part of the struggle with this whole area. How do we use terminology? How do we make sure that we communicate in the best way possible? And of course, what we refer to as people who are United Kingdom minority ethnic people, or Black Asian minority ethnic people, or BAME, or Black and Brown, and I've even heard Black, Brown and Beige as or invisible minorities. all of these phrases are used over and over again. For this session, if I use the word black, I mean all of that, okay? Because that's a phrase that I grew up with, and it's used therefore much more in a political sense rather than just a colour sense. And so if I stumble across that phrase just as black, you'll know why I haven't clarified it very well. So let's begin. And it's a positive title as well. We are talking about UKME people's vital contribution throughout the church. Let me share with you a Gujarati Christian proverb. Now, this is a fantastic proverb. And what it means is who God first created you to be, that you must become. And as I think about that, it makes me feel as if we are in a place where there's no doubt that each of us are created in God's image. And this image is in no way inferior or in no way superior to any other person and their image and the image of God within them. And often what we need to do in order for our contribution to be godly is to unveil the veils that have appeared on that image of God. So it's not necessarily trying to do more and more, but it seems to me a lot of it is about uncloaking. And as we do that, that's when we begin to make our authentic contribution. So if you and I can see that there are some vicars, I can see that there are some lay people as well. If you are leading a fellowship and you're not making your authentic contribution, then surely the impact of Christ will be much greater if you can uncloak some of that which hides the image that God created you and I to be in. Now, Polly has read out some of my background, so I'll quickly shift through this. I thought it'd be useful for you to know what might have cloaked some of that image of God and how that shaping has occurred for me, as it does for each of us. Even before I became a follower of Christ in 1968, I remember being dressed in a cassock, a surplice, and a ruff, and was a choir boy. And I knew, and it was before decimalization, because I was shocked the first time at the end of the week I was given 6 old pennies. I thought, what's this for? Singing to God. And I realized that it was something that was so strange. I don't know, do they still pay choir boys and choir girls for being in the choir? I have no idea. Anyway, I became a follower of Christ in 1975. And as I think back, then it was because here was a young man, my age at the time, and his name's Anthony Groom in Leicester. And he had God's image encloaked within him so much. A white young man who, when I was being racially abused and people were being violent to me at school, he would stand in between. And he would often get hit. And I couldn't figure out why he would do that. Why doesn't he just, imagine he didn't see anything? Why doesn't he just, and as I chat to him over the years, I realized it because he said, well, I'm a follower of Christ, he said, I'm a Christian. And that was an immense impact upon my life and my journey into Christendom. And since then, it's been my calling, I suppose, to try and get some sense of equality, diversity, racial justice, anti-racism in the church. And if it has 4 or 5 acronyms, I've been part of it. And you can do a test with these acronyms on your screen. Does anyone know what all of those stand for? Does anyone know what 3 of those 5 stand for? Okay, buy me a drink, then I'll tell you. I won't waste time on it now. And the first one is the Evangelical Christians for Racial Justice. And the BTGW, you might not know, the Black Theology, it should have been BTWG, Black Theology Working Group. And it was the Black Theology Working Group that published A Time to Speak, A Time to Act, and The Messiah People. I don't know if these, oh no, I'm on a blurred screen, so you can't see those. But anyway, these books published from 1990 onwards. And we have the From Lament to Action report that's gone to Synod, and it's now the Church's strategy. In 1988, I remember taking another strategy to General Synod, one of a number. So that was one, and there's been a number since, and that's part of the journey that shapes what I would be saying to you. And as a follower of Christ with that Hindu background, I have navigated through breaking generations of traditions to follow Christ, to follow the truth as I understand it, entered a foreign place and given it my absolute trust. I've shared that truth, that Christ, to others. And it has compelled me to die to self. And I continue to strive to be selfless. Now we're talking, therefore, about institutional and structures and structural racism. I thought let's have a quick go at defining some of this. The words structural and institutional almost mean the same. If you know the phrase structural racism, institutional racism, and structural just simply is more about the wider society, so a little bit more external, whereas institutional is more internal to a sector such as the education sector. I'm a school governor at a Church of England school, and it's quite interesting how strong that church school sector is in its culture, its identity, in its institutionalization, the institution of policing, and of course, the church as an institution. So that's the phrase structure and institutional. What about racism? I think we would all agree, wouldn't we, that racism is a sin. When I was in South Africa in the late 1980s, before apartheid was abolished, I remember being locked up with Joel Edwards. I'm sure some of you know Joel Edwards, and we were visiting in 1989, and we were locked up because they didn't like the look of us. And then we met some white Christian colleagues within South Africa, and they gave me a paper and said, actually, racism of the kind we operate isn't a sin. So I don't assume any longer, but I hope that everyone on this call will assume that racism is a sin. And as any sin, it eats from inside out. It's like an onion. It corrupts from inside out, and it really can't be repaired without that miraculous Christ to absolve those sins. And it's so pervasive. Black woman, Sybil Phoenix. I love her phrase. She said to me one day, she's a Methodist lay minister. She said, Raj, if you're not racist, your education has failed you. And so this pervasive sin is bound to be something that we have to wrestle with. It will be one of those veils, one of those covers that will start to form amongst that, on top of the image of God. And I'm going to give you a little bit of an exercise to begin with. Now, here are 3 definitions, 3 good definitions of institutional racism, and A, B, and C. If you want to just have can you read them okay, everyone? Would you like me to read them out? Thank you. Have a read and tell me which one you prefer, any one of you. Okay, so you're in a church where you do a lot of reading, so you should have finished by now. Now, tell me, any one of you, which do you prefer?
I've gone for C.
Thank you, Polly. And that is Stephen Unden's definition from the Institute of Race Relations. And actually, it's the one I prefer too. It's a very solid one. But actually, this was just my way of getting you to think about institutional definitions by getting you to do some reading now. We'll move on to the next bit. Now, how do we dismantle this institutional racism in the church? That's the real big question, isn't it? Now, I have made this assumption, as I've assumed that you will agree that racism is sin. I've also assumed that people on this event are not necessarily needed to be persuaded that there is such a thing as institutional racism, or at least because so many of us keep going on about it, you will be suspicious that there might be. And so I'm going to make that assumption rather than give you lots of cases and stories. And I've got quite a number just from recently to do with the Church of England, both myself and others. And so if you want those, then I know that there's plenty of these stories around. There's no sense of needing to, I think, recap on that. What I really want to do is to ask that question: how do we dismantle institutional racism in the church? And there's a three-step approach. First of all, let's ask ourselves the question: for whose sake should we dismantle it? Because I think where there's a will, there's a way. And as soon as we can begin to accept that it's for our sake, whether you're black or white, then the need to dismantle institutional racism is for our sake. It will benefit us, and that's the first thing. And actually, as it benefits us, it also integrally is for the sake of the gospel. I'm convinced that Jesus died in order to dismantle institutional division, not just Jew and Gentile, but between man and God. And so it's very much at the core of the gospel for me as well. Secondly, that we have to accept and understand that the church at the moment is stuck in the pit of institutional racism. As I say, we could go through cases, stories, definitions, but I'm going to trust that we can begin to, and as we do the exercise, this will become apparent, because in the exercise, we'll be able to recognize where we are and where we need to move to. And we can ask the question: are we just there temporarily, or have we been stuck there for some time? And then thirdly, UKME people are required at this stage to authentically make their vital contribution, and equally for others to catalyze that, not to be the authentic contribution that's required from UKME people, but to catalyze that, or at least step aside, at least don't hinder it. And it's best described as a journey, the dismantling of institutional racism. And a journey that is easier. As I've had the opportunity to work in many countries And what I've learned is that what our mindsets fall into often become our world. And in the global north, the way that we think, the way that we may make progress is that here we're better at identifying problems, gaps, deficits, etc., etc. And then we come up with a strategy, a tactic to solve it, to find the solution, the answer, or to give a fix. Now that's actually perfectly fine, brilliant. We can see it works. In the global south, we're much better there at navigating through a problem, yet realizing that a problem may have two or more equally valid answers. And often they're worlds apart or even opposite. And again, that's equally valid as a way forward, and it works. Let me ask you, what do you think is right? Is it right, or is it better to breathe in or to breathe out? Is it right or better to lament or to act? Is it right or better to be pastoral or prophetic? And I can see from a few of your faces that little grin that tells me, you blighter, this is a trick question. Of course it is. But you can begin to see that these are actually everyday questions. That sometimes if you've got the global north way of thinking, where it's an either or thinking, where you identify the problem and think that either lamenting or acting, one of those is the right answer. It doesn't work. Can you breathe in and out at the same time? And in a sense, it's a bit like lamenting and acting, pastoral and prophetic. There is a touch and an interdependency of one on the other. But actually, to wholeheartedly be able to do the both is impossible. Therefore, we have to find a journey that takes us through. And so I thought I would invite you to do a quick exercise. It doesn't last very long. If you have breathing problems, then I'll leave it to you either take part in the exercise or not. And at any stage, if you feel too uncomfortable, then please feel free just to do what makes you comfortable. Are you happy to do the exercise? Yes. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, so I'm going to give you 3 instructions, and they're just very clear instructions. You don't do any more or any less than what I'm asking you to do. And then we will debrief the exercise. Okay, so are you ready, my friends? Great. So the first instruction is this. Take a deep breath in and hold it. Second instruction, take a breath out and hold it again. Third instruction, breathe normally. Okay, thank you very much. Some of you were starting to look worried, so was I actually. Let me debrief this exercise for you, because I'm hoping that it will begin to map this journey for us. So this is called a polarity map. And what I've described to you here in, out, lamenting, acting, pastoral, prophetic. And the world is full of polarities, dilemmas, conundrums, paradoxes, call them what you will, complexities. And where you've got the right answer or two right answers to the same question, how do you have life? You've got to breathe in and you've got to breathe out. They are interdependent. In this case, they're absolute opposites. And so this polarity map, what it shows you is that if you're able to navigate the journey of breathing in and breathing out very well, then you will have life. But if you are not able to navigate it well, it will lead to death. And in this map, you've got 4 quadrants. The top quadrants are the positive quadrants, and the bottom quadrants are the negative quadrants. And if you just type in polarity mapping, Barry Johnson, this is a well-established methodology, particularly taught to leaders on how to analyze things that are difficult, particularly for us to analyze in the West, where you've got lots of different conundrums to deal with. Now, in the exercise, I asked you to hold your breath, to breathe in and hold your breath. Anyone like to take a guess how long that was for?
20 seconds.
30 seconds, did you say? Yes, it was not far off. It was 21 seconds. And it was starting to get uncomfortable, I expect. And if I had carried on, I think it would have got increasingly uncomfortable. And that's what happens with breathing in. It seems like the right answer. Great, breathing in. But if you hold it at that place, you will start to get uncomfortable. And the reason is that when you breathe in oxygen, which is refreshing, and it helps you feel good. And that's why it's in the positive quadrant. But if you hold breathing in, it starts to turn into carbon dioxide as your bodily systems, your muscles start to use the oxygen and turn it into carbon dioxide, which is a poison. And so how long do you think you held your breath out for?
10 seconds.
10, almost right as well. Yes, but exactly right in terms of proportion. A third of the time you held your breath in for, and it was getting equally uncomfortable. And you can see that poison not only builds up, but if that carries on, it becomes harder and harder. And then I said to you, breathe out. And I bet that was a relief for some of us. And so it turned positive again. And that's a relief because you've got rid of that poison, carbon dioxide. And then I said, breathe normally. And so first thing you did was you realized that you had a dearth. You breathed out the carbon dioxide. The dearth of oxygen meant that you then had to go towards finding an oxygen. So where after feeling relieved and breathing out the poison, if you stayed at breathing out for too long, a dearth of oxygen builds up and you're desperate to start breathing normally again. And so this is the cycle that takes place. It's a bit like you drop a stone and it falls vertically down, whereas an airplane rises in a diagonal. And this is how this polarity map of life works. It works with so many life situations. So in thinking that the right answer could be in, the right answer could be out, if we stay there too long, then it becomes negative. And what we're trying to do with breathing in and out is, and we've done it from a very early age, the cycle builds up so that we don't drop down so far anymore. In fact, we hardly feel any discomfort at all, unless you've got some breathing condition. And so the journey is reaching the peaks of the positives and hardly touching the bottom. So it looks a little bit more like this. It's like a butterfly with big wings at the top. Now let's turn this into another of our conundrums. And the one where we're looking at that leads towards this vital contribution that I want to talk about. So when we talk about such a journey, we're improving what we're doing. So if we had a breathing problem, you get better and better until the butterfly wings are large at the top, it becomes natural. And so we're improving that journey, and where we're beginning to experience the best of both worlds. And that journey is one where we have to start with understanding where we are at, and if we've got stuck, and where we need to go to next. And within the map, there is a higher purpose, in this case, breathing in that it's life, and deeper sphere, which is death. So that's the model, that's the map that I want to use as we do this exercise concerning institutional racism. And there are two paradoxes that I want to look at. But to begin with, I want to look at the one which is the pastoral approach to dealing with institutional racism, as next to the prophetic action in dealing with institutional racism. And as we do this, for me, it helps to know what is our next milestone as the church. How can we get UKME's authentic and vital contribution throughout the church? So again, a little bit of an exercise, and please feel free to put your comments into the chat box this time, so that everyone can put something in. If you're looking at the pastoral approach to institutional racism, especially those of you that are in any way part of the leadership of the church, you should be good at this, okay? And what are some of the things? And I did invite some previous ministers and present ministers that I know to comment before this meeting. But what are some of the advantages? What are some of the benefits, some of the positives, the pluses of dealing in a pastoral way to institutional racism? Just the benefits, the advantages. Do type them into the chat box if you have got anything. Thank you, Polly. Maybe it's a tougher question than I thought. So what, and this is how we have to.
Raj, I can't. I've got something in, but I can't get it into the chat box.
Or just Terry, just speak it out. That will be fine. You don't have to type it in. I just want to make sure everyone had a chance to do it.
You can pick up that somebody's uncomfortable. You can be available to give somebody some space to talk freely about issues that may be concerning them. So more or less what other people have said.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So giving people space to talk freely, especially if they're feeling uncomfortable. And Polly, and thank you. Oh, there's more and more coming in now. We're becoming more pastoral by the second. Walk beside people and redirect them. Provide an insight into what is wrong. Demonstrate compassion for people listening to people's stories. Now, what happens if you do all of those things for ever and a day? Will you be able to just deal with institutional racism by doing those things? So what might be, now let's see if you can think of what might be the negatives or the disadvantages of just having a pastoral approach to institutional racism. Thank you very much, Tracy. You may not take action. People don't necessarily grow in their understanding, limited capacity. It may not change structures and policies, Keith. And so thank you for all of you. And I think everyone can see the chat box, so you can see. So you're beginning to get the sense. It's really quite easy, isn't it? What this is beginning to do is give you a tool by which you can look at your own church, your own situation. So where are we with this? Are we reaping the benefits of pastoral approach and institutional racism, or have we done that so long that we're now beginning to experience the negatives as if we've taken deep breath in, but we're still holding our breath in? Now, let me just ask you the next bit. Now, what are some of the benefits of taking prophetic action on institutional racism? Okay, so taking action, as simple as that. Preventing is better than cure. Clear statements, bold moves, clarity of action. Okay, so you're beginning to see why, if we are in this experiencing negative effects of being pastoral for too long, that we need to do the antithesis, galvanizing a move in a more dynamic in direction. And then what would happen if you remained in that prophetic action for too long? What might you begin to experience? What would be some of the disbenefits, the negatives of taking prophetic action for too long? Burnout. Who needs to lead this action? Just wondering about this. Okay, we'll come to that question later. Yeah, I think we've got 2 burnouts, haven't we? Yeah, absolutely. Highlights the problem, alerts the church that something needs to be done. Could reach Parliament by you. Okay, a suggestion. May no longer be addressing key issues. And so we begin to see that, think that you're the expert. Very good. And you begin to see that actually both of these are right. But if you do either of these for too long, then you'll begin to experience the negatives. And what I did was I just did a quick map of this in terms of my own experience. And actually there's some overlap with the sorts of things that you've suggested as well. I don't think I will read. I'll just leave it there for a moment for you just to ponder on that rather than me read them out. And thank you for the additional comments that have come through. All excellent. Yeah, people might shut down because it's too hard. Individuals get in the group action need to listen alongside it. And so you get a really good map of the pluses and the minuses of both of these two right answers to this question that we're posing. Now let's look at the highest purpose. Now, if we can, like in breathing in and out, if we can do it well, then we have life. If we can get the pastoral approach to institutional racism and the prophetic action on institutional racism journeying so that it has big butterfly wings at the top, then we will know what that will look like. For me, it will be something like, well, we will be Christ-like. And not only will it benefit the church, but it will be challenging to the world. However, if we are in the bottom realms, more if our butterfly has wings that are bigger at the bottom, then there is going to be paternalistic attitudes. There will be inequality, and contributions of particularly marginalized people will be quashed. And so here is a map, and then what we begin to see are, well, what's within them, as well as what would it look like when it's going well and when it's not going well. And one of you asked the question, who will lead it? This map then helps us to look at what are some of the action steps. So the action steps in order to attain the positives on both sides, and then an early warning signal, like a oil light on a car. As soon as you begin diving down towards underneath the bottom layers, then someone is to say, hold on a minute, we're becoming too lost in group action, or we're not listening. What we're doing is lots of action. And so you have warnings lights. So that's what the leader will be doing, is making sure that the actions and the alerts are in place. Now, the next key thing to do, and do this now, if you were to use this map or the map that you've designed through the comments, which quadrant would you say the Church of England is in at the moment, or the church that you are part of in at the moment? Which quadrant best describes? Now, there'll be a little bit of something in each, but which best describes where the church is at the moment? Any thoughts, my friends? Okay, someone's put the top right. Thank you. Bottom left. Thank you. And of course, it will vary from where you are, what you see. I cheated because I've realized that when I was doing this, I put the bottom left quadrant in bold, because that's where I think we are as the Church of England, in my opinion. And maybe, and of course, as the journey goes on, of course, you've got to rise from the bottom left. And I think a couple of you have also put several of you put bottom left. So you maybe agree. The next stage is the top right. So maybe one of the person who's put top right has started to say, let's not live in this bottom left. And the only place you can go from bottom left is actually to top right, because that's the way this model works, this map works. You drop down vertically, you rise diagonally. And that begins to tell you what your actions are going to be. If you're in the bottom left, then your actions are going to be, well, you're going to start to confront because you care. That will be the action. So think of a very specific, smart, time-bound action to say, this is where we recognize we are. This is where we need to be. And as you're doing that, as you're writing your actions, also start to write what's our alerts going to be, because we know that after we've done that for long enough, our confrontations will turn into conflict. And who will spot that? How will we know that's happening? Because as soon as that happens, then you want to travel back up to the diagonal top left. And that's how the journey works. And this is where the Church of England, I think, has begun, or rather hasn't begun to create the change that it would like to see, because we are so fully focused on one answer, either a pastoral approach or a prophetic approach, that we do that for so long and it drops down and we go back again. So in 1988, when I took the strategy, we did that. Let's have a pastoral, it was a racial justice strategy. Great. Rather than an anti-racist strategy. And so we've done that over and over again. And what we need to do is have this prophetic voice. And the deepest fear of this is that when the pastoral and prophetic gets mixed up, and the deepest fear is that people are patronized and filed away without a say. And some of you UKME folk might feel like that. You might feel devalued and quashed in terms of your authentic contribution. I know that at one time in doing a session, someone in defense said, no, but Raj, we're not racist. We treat everyone as if they were white. and you begin to see that actually that's not authentic. You're covering my God-given image with something that I'm not. I don't want that, thank you. I want to be who God created. Who God has created me to be, that's who I will be. And that's why it has to be this journey, a journey that is unusual for us, the higher purpose. And I want to read something from Ed de la Torre. It's the same Bible. If one reads it to talk of mysteries above, we can fall asleep devoutly, especially if we're on top of the social pyramid. But if those below the pyramid read the Bible together, our eyes open wide to understand the mysteries below, and we break out in joy and anger at the good news. And this is a good anger. In English, we only have one word for anger. In Hindi and Sanskrit, there are 5. This is one of the better 5s. And it brings about that prophetic righteousness that's needed. And anger, therefore, is often trying to dismantle. It needs to be anti-racist. And now, so this is, if you're there, then the journey takes you from bottom left to top right. I think I've gone through. And really, there are just 2 slides I think I want to share with you. One is, what is then the prophetic challenge to the church? If we're going from bottom right to top left, it's that prophetic challenge, that prophetic action. I would say my prophetic challenge to the church and to white people would be, 1, get rid of hierarchy. The church, someone who's become a follower of Christ from a Hindu background, I've never really understood in my heart of hearts, and that heart was touched by God's Holy Spirit in January 1975, why we deal with the level of hierarchy and status orientation. Verbosity, so many words that we're using, and often they're written. What happened to the Holy Spirit? Where does the Holy Spirit come in on the act? Hypocrisy. Well, I'll move on to the next one. Stealing other people's decisions is wrong. This is the quashing that I talk about. And, in trying to, and that's the paternalism, and get rid of inner insecurity. Don't worry if you make a mistake in relation to Black people, in relation to racism. Make the mistake, be secure enough to say, I'm sorry, I didn't know, I didn't understand, let's do something about it. And replace it with being sacrificial and selfless. Yoga actually is the Sanskrit word for being selfless action. That's what yoga means. And my request, my challenge to the church is really the same challenge it gave me. And I read these out at the beginning, to break generations of traditions to follow the truth. This is what you asked of me when I had to become a follower of Christ, to enter a foreign place in absolute trust, to share that truth, especially to those that are close, and to die to self and be selfless. But actually, today I wanted my loudest challenge to be to UKME people, because often we, especially at Black History Month time, feel quite smug, feel quite comfortable. Don't. My challenge is don't accept inclusion without co-ownership. I don't want to be included in anything. I want to be a co-owner. I don't want to be a guest. I want to be a shareholder. Don't strive for representation. So many of our solutions seem to be, well, we need more Black people represented in. Representation isn't enough. Make sure that your authentic and equal contribution is there. And BAME, whatever your terminology might be, don't collude. Raise your heads high and be authentic. Know better who you are. Uncloak those things that are cloaking that. Applied lived experience. Your lived experience is such a teacher. Be secure in the identity and image of God that you've been given, and to act prophetically. A poem that I suppose, especially in these days where petrol is hard to come by, but let me read this in closing. This is my last slide. Written by Mahmoud Jamal in 1984. One day, I would like to take both my hands, for I consider life itself too dear to lose, dip them in petrol, then set them alight with a candle flame, and dedicate them to those who acted while I wept and wrote. My friends, take prophetic action, don't write so much. God bless you all. So,
thank you so much, Raj. That was really thought-provoking. We have about 5 minutes. Are you happy to take questions, Raj?
of course.
Does anyone have a question for Raj? Perhaps if we could stop sharing your screen?
Yeah, I shall do that.
That would be great. Thank you. Does anyone have a question for Raj? Anyone?
Yes, is it possible to have the slides sent to us?
I've sent the slides to you, Polly, so I suppose if people write to Polly, she can forward them to you.
Okay.
As you're happy with that, yes, I can do that.
I could probably attach them to, if you want them straight away. Do ask your question and I'll try and do that.
In which case, we will need Polly's address and
email address.
Well, yes, otherwise, how are we going to get these?
Okay, I'm just going to put that in the chat for you now. Any other questions?
Please, that can't be the only question.
I have a question, and it probably goes back to question around. I'm thinking more of a kind of a local church level, in terms of if you're in a church that actually is quite majority white, but you really want to address these issues, but you want to make sure that there is that co-ownership and representation. It is around the leadership of this all, because I feel, I mean, my background is that I have mixed race kids, but I don't have the personal experience of, sorry, I can see it I see it secondhand more, their experience of being in a majority white church. I don't experience it firsthand. So I think my question is more around who takes a lead on ensuring, and everybody has a role to play, but I'm just like, in that kind of situation, how do we ensure that the right people are taking the lead, or who? I'm sorry, it's a bit kind of garbled question.
No, and unless someone takes the lead, nothing's going to start. And so, Tracy, I think I've definitely put the onus on UKME black people to say, please don't be so bashful, don't collude, take the lead. And if all you do in the lead, I wanted to give you a talk, just say, let's do this map. Let's fill this map for our concept. And at that moment, what you do is get a group of people together, a great diagonal slice of the church, a great mix of people, and just have a chat around it and fill it out. And then ask the question, where are we? Because you know where it will go to next. So be the facilitator.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I have one. You've used terms like map, journey, and leading us on the journey. Where do you see the destination?
Yes, so the highest purpose in the map, as I try to explain, is the destination. So you've got so at the top of that diagram, where I put the highest purpose, so the destination of having a pastoral approach to institutional racism, journeying along with the prophetic action on institutional racism. The destination is being Christ-like and challenging the world in terms of racism.
Okay, thank you.
One final question, anybody? Okay, well, once again, on behalf of the group and on behalf of the Oxford Diocese, Raj, thank you so much for giving your time and for giving us so much to think about, and perhaps another way of looking at the journey. I certainly have never thought of it in terms of pastoral or prophetic before. So that's a new tool, something that I've gained from this evening. So thank you very much for your time. I'm sure the rest will agree. Yes.
Bless you all. Thank you.
Bless you all.
There is a question from Rosemary.
Mm-hmm. Yes, go ahead.
Sorry, I thought we were just going to log, just about to log out. My question I actually put in the chat, it's what do you know now of this journey and conversation, Raj, that you did not know at the beginning of your ministry?
At the beginning of?
Your ministry. What do you know now?
What do I know now? Oh, what a great question. I think I know that when it feels like failure, it really is the time to brush off your shoes and just stand up again. I didn't realize the journey would have to go along these loops on so many occasions. There came a point, and I don't know if you read any of the biographies of Indian Christians who have been part of the Anglican Church. I can think of two at least who actually unbaptized themselves out of the Anglican Church, and who said, look, we became followers of Christ from Hinduism, and this is the battering we've felt. And they've said, look, you know, we just are going to go back into Hinduism. And they had massive public ceremonies. And at one stage, I'm thinking, I felt, do you know what? You've hit your head against the wall for so long. I started with ECRJ in 1985, so that's probably before some of you were born, I'm sure. And that has been, so that's been one learning. I think the second learning really has been to keep true to yourself, and I suppose I've been trying to say is there's a dilemma. There's several other dilemmas that I would have liked to have dealt with. One is, you know, God is truth, and truth is God, and just to map that and to see how do you follow that journey, and that's been very helpful.
That's brilliant. That's a wonderful note to finish on. Thank you again, everybody, for your time and for joining in. And we look forward to seeing you at the other lectures. Thanks very much. Thank you, Raj. Thank you.
Thank you ever so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.